Welcome to Midweek Experiments in Faithfulness. This is a weekly program where we learn and grow with each other in community. Each week, we engage a unique and meaningful topic or spiritual practice that we can incorporate into our lives. My name is Brent, and I am the Program and Engagement Manager here at Beacon Hill Friends House. We are a Quaker Center for Learning in Boston, Massachusetts. We're home to Beacon Hill Friends Meeting, and we are a residential community of about 20 people. 2 weeks ago, I shared an overview of the Enneagram, talking about kind of this wide angle lens of like what the Enneagram is and like how many types there are and the kind of ways that we interact with the Enneagram in our day-to-day lives. Tonight, we're going to zoom in on the Enneagram Type One, and this will be the first of the deep dives of Enneagram type. And then every 2 weeks, we're going to have another midweek where I deep dive into another Enneagram type. So if you haven't already watched the first video called Why We Clash, Why We Click, feel free to go back and do that. Otherwise, you're all set, and we're going to dive into the world of the Enneagram Type One, also known as the Reformer. Type Ones are fueled by a deep desire to make things better, to pursue integrity, and to live according to a strong internal sense of right and wrong. But what's really going on beneath the surface? In this midweek, we'll take a deeper look at the Enneagram Type One, and you'll learn what motivates this type, what they fear, and why their inner critic never seems to take a day off. We'll explore the incredible strengths that make Type Ones such principled leaders, their challenges with self compassion, and how they strive to balance their drive for improvement with the messiness of real life. Whether you're a Type One yourself, love someone who is, or just want to better understand this unique personality type, this session will leave you with insights and tools to appreciate their perspective and support their journey. Tonight, we'll discover what makes Type Ones tick. All right. So I am going to share my screen so that we can get right into the Enneagram Type One, the Reformer. This is an overview. The Enneagram Type One is what they call the Enneagram's moral compass. And they actually are really good at it. They have a lot of wisdom. Even at young ages, they kind of like come out into the world just kind of like knowing what's up, knowing right and wrong, and having a good sense of how to achieve moral integrity and personal alignment with right and wrong. Perfection is less about approval and more about internal alignment. There's a little bit of a misunderstanding that people might think that an Enneagram Type One is kind of a know-it-all and that they are like always like barking orders about right and wrong to everyone else, just for the sake of being right. But it's not actually that. It is an internal alignment that matters to them. They know the right way to do things because they have probably read the owner's manual. They have probably um, gotten all kinds of information about the right way to do things, the safe way to do things. And if they don't know it, they will find it out. They are very committed to justice and equity. And when it comes time to show up to activism and speaking truth to power, they are fearless. They will stand their ground and say, this is the right thing, that is the wrong thing. It doesn't matter what you say, there is right and wrong, and we're just going to have to insist on that. But at the same time, even though they are masters at showing up for right and wrong, they have such a hard time with their inner critic because no matter how perfect they try to be, their inner critic says that's not good enough. Some fun little quirks about an Enneagram Type One is these fun little things. Waits for the walk signal at a crosswalk, uses perfect grammar and punctuation in text messages, straightens a picture frame at a stranger's house, reads owner's manuals for fun, and small print for sport. Uses only the car's dealership for repairs and maintenance. Does this sound familiar to any of you? Do you have a type one in your life that shows up like this? Always wears a helmet and always uses turn signals. Needs me to move this arrow to the left, please, because it is not perfectly in line with all the other arrows. Has an existential crisis if someone puts ketchup on steak, and organizes bookshelves by size, color, and genre. The list, I assure you, could go on and on and on. Their core motivation, they want to be very good. And improvement is just as important to them for themselves as it is for improving the world around them. They have a strong uh, desire to be ethical and to have integrity. They want everything to be done the right way, and they absolutely know what that right way is. Thank you very much. And they always strive for an ideal version of themselves. This sometimes, if they come from a religious background, that can inspire them to maintain that religious belief system throughout their entire lives. Because if that's how they learned it, then it's likely, in many cases, unless they are converted to a different set of beliefs, it is likely they will hold that set of beliefs for a very long time. You'll see a lot of Enneagram Type Ones, like, for instance, in the priesthood or carrying on the family tradition of being pastors or shepherds, chaplains, because they are so concerned about making sure that the world is a better place. And a lot of times that is interpreted through the lens of religion. That you'll often find them being very devout, very serious about their religion. Not all ones are religious, but some ones are political, and they take that same seriousness to their politics. They take that same seriousness to their activism. They'll rarely will they joke and tease about something like their environmental beliefs or their beliefs around foreign policy or whatever it is that they are passionate about that they think is right. They are very serious about it. Their underlying fears of making mistakes is a big one. They do not want to talk about mistakes because it just plagues them. They have exacting standards that they need to live up to, and they will get very little sleep if they feel like they are not living up to their very high standards for themselves. Um, Moral imperfection, if someone questions their integrity, it can be like a knife to the heart. It is just brutal if someone insists that they in some way have been ethically compromised. Strengths and challenges. The type one is very concerned about justice. They're very highly principled. They're responsible, hardworking, detail oriented. And I put at the bottom here secretly funny because they're kind of serious type of people, but but they're also very witty. And so um, sometimes if you're not expecting it, they will come back with a retort to somebody said, and it will be hilarious. And so sometimes their humor is a little dry. Sometimes you won't catch it the first time until you like think again about what they said and like understand then that they were being funny, and then it's hilarious. So they actually have a really great sense of humor. It's just not the same type of humor that other Enneagram types will have. They're very rigid, very critical. They have black and white thinking. Um, their judgment can go outward or inward or both. So they can be a little bit judgy, but they also are are just as judgmental of themselves. They struggle with perfectionism, and they're not very expansive with their patience. They can be kind of short fused when it comes to the way that other people behave that they think is just not living up to the standards that they think it should. Ones in love, they are loyal to the core. Ones are very, they love deeply, and they commit. And a lot of the way that they are in love is governed by their sense of right and wrong. And sometimes that comes from their childhood. What did they see around them? What did the people around them in love look like and act like? And that is often what they will try to carry forward into their adulthood. And so, if you wonder what a type one will be like in love, you can often look at some of the examples that they have in their life of people that they actually respect and look up to. And that is likely how they will be in love. So they're very honest and direct. They're not going to play games with you. Sometimes they can be a little sharp with their words, but it's coming from a place of being accurate. It's not likely that they're going to do a lot of exaggerating. And so they really want to be accurate. And you might even hear them like backing up a couple of sentences and saying, what I just said back there, what I actually meant was this very minute and specific change in what I had said. Because the accuracy is really important. And sometimes it can be a pet peeve for them if someone else just kind of like is willy-nilly with exaggeration, because they're like, no, I was there. They didn't say this, they said that. And it's very like verbatim. They are supportive and also very practical. They want to see your dreams come true, and they are all about trying to help you find a way to do that. And likely they know like the right way for your dreams to play out. What makes them angry? Oh my goodness, injustice in whatever that looks like for them. It can be a wide angle systemic oppression that makes them angry, or it can be someone cutting in line at the grocery store or at the coffee shop. Um, Whatever feels unfair to them is going to really make them mad. Incompetence and laziness. If hello, the job was clearly done wrong, they have this very clear idea of how things are supposed to be. And sometimes they can accuse other people of being lazy if they don't want to get up and do it the way it's supposed to be done. They do not like to be criticized. Criticism means that someone sees them as less than perfect. And their inner critic is already talking about how imperfect they are. And so that criticism can really like pinpoint parts of themselves that they really wish were more perfect. Rules being ignored. You will find them in traffic bellowing about why people can't use their turn signals or why people aren't getting over for the ambulance behind everyone. And they are just it is just it drives them nuts when people are ignoring the rules. Feeling out of control. Chaos is really hard for a one to handle. They just get so stressed out when things are either too messy or too loud or too out of control. It makes it really hard for an Enneagram type one. What they do about it, how do they live out their feelings of anger? The Enneagram type one typically does not is not so demonstrative with their anger. You will often see it kind of seething under the surface. Um, you might not hear them yelling across the office corridor, but you will get an email, and it will have. They're typically very good with words, and they have a broad vocabulary, and they know how to use it. and make it very clear how they feel. And often they will they'll be very quiet about it. Um, but man, like the difference between talking to them in person and reading something they write is night and day. Because if you approach the Enneagram Type One and say, "Tell me about your feelings of anger," they'll be like, "What feelings of anger? I'm not angry. I just know what's right and wrong, and I'm just going to stand here in my truth." Right. But if you get an email from them, they will talk all about their feelings because it's not quite as face to face. They have an opportunity to kind of craft their argument and craft their words, which is harder to do just on the spot and impromptu. And so you'll often get their scathing report. I had a seminary professor who identified as an Enneagram Type One, and in person he was very affirming of the assignments that we would do. But on paper, our grades, he would write in the more margins, and they would be scathing. He'd be like, "I don't. This is barely passable work." And I'm just like, why didn't he tell me that when I was standing in front of his face? And the reason is because it's so much easier for them to do in something other than face to face. Um, the ethical takedown an Enneagram Type One's specialty. I just hope you take some time to reflect on what this says about your character. It may sound dramatic to other Enneagram types, but it is so serious to them. And they are not joking. It is not a joking matter to them. They are so committed to the fact that you should have known that this was wrong or that this was in somehow an error. Um, and depending on the kind of type one that they can really bring it with the dramatic reflections about your character and your integrity. So it can feel really personal. And you may not have met a type one if you haven't seen them on their vicious cleaning spree. Um, there is just something easier about having a sense of control when it is about cleanliness or about one's environment than it is trying to change the person who is in the living room. And so if they can't change the person who's sitting in the living room, they will dust and mop and scrub and organize, and they will in some way try to take back that control. um, and somehow cleaning, they already want a cleaner environment. It doesn't mean I've known some ones who live with clutter and other things like that, but they are typically very concerned about the hygienic uh, environment around them, making sure that everything is safe and sterile and hygienic. Why is it so important to them? Justice is everything to them. Type ones have to believe in fairness because their entire worldview is built on fairness and justice and equity. And even if we're talking about someone cutting in line at the grocery store or having too many items for the checkout that mandates that you're only allowed to have 10 items for this lane. If someone shows up with 15 items, that is not fair because I couldn't just walk up there with my 15 items because the sign says 10. Now, that seems like petty to some other Enneagram types, but it is all about justice and fairness and rules. And they are here for our best interest. This is what keeps the grocery store moving. This is what keeps us from getting backlogged. Um, so there's like they have reasons, and when those reasons are opposed by someone being what they consider careless or reckless or irresponsible, it can really make them mad. It's not personal. They just want things to be done right. This little image of the person lying in bed with eyes wide open, thinking about all the things that they should have said. I'm sure that many of us have experienced this, but the Enneagram Type One does this in spades. The thing that if they could have just said this thing, it would have made a difference. It would have convinced the other person that they were right. They're not trying to be difficult. They are trying to be accurate. And that's so important for them. Now let's talk about what gives them joy. Because these are not angry people. They do have a certain relationship with anger, but they also have a really close relationship to joy. And they find joy in when things are done right, when things look good, when things are symmetrical. That perfectly formatted document or a well organized closet. Um, and not only do they enjoy those things, but they enjoy creating those things. And so you may discover that the person who is perfectly suited to come and help you organize is your Enneagram Type One, because they actually like doing it, because there's immediate gratification in chaos to order. And it just gives them joy to see chaos turn to order, or something that is not right become right. That's what gets them adjusting that picture frame in someone's house, whether they know that person or not. They will adjust it because certainly the owner of that house would have adjusted it if they had seen how crooked it is. Um, they have joy from knowing that they stayed true to their values and that they did the right thing, even if that thing comes at a great cost. They kind of like it when someone pulls them out of their head and gets them to actually have a good time and loosen up. They like being around people who are full of joy, as long as those people are not doing something that will bring chaos to order. Feeling like they've truly helped someone. Probably the most impactful thing that you can tell your Enneagram Type One is, because of you, I did the right thing. Knowing that they were an influence on you to make a good decision, to be orderly, to be responsible, to be right. Um, that gives them a lot of fulfillment. And then small acts of order in a chaotic world, like like witnessing someone returning a shopping cart to the corral, or having great handwriting. Um, it is just these little things that can really just cheer up our Enneagram Type Ones. A Type One at work is the office gold standard. I actually have some Enneagram Type One in me because I'm an Enneagram Type Two. And so I have an Enneagram Type One influence to my number. And when I was driving a truck, I had these 3-ring binders with spreadsheets that I had printed out on my printer, and I would fill them out with pen, and then I would take my little set of different colored highlighters, and I would highlight each line based on what category that entry fit into. So this color coded spreadsheets thing hits home to me. I love highlighters of different colors. I like having different colors on my Google Calendar. I love like sorting things by color. They will catch every typo, inefficiency, and logistical flaw. They are really good at recognizing something that is not in order. They can tell quickly when something is not quite right. They're taking notes, they're making plans, they are um, they are making sure that everything is flowing smoothly. They're not great at delegating. They sometimes overperform because they are very concerned that something is done right. And sometimes it takes longer to talk about how to do something right than it does just to pick it up and do it yourself. And so sometimes it's they need to be encouraged to let other people take ownership of a project, even if they don't do it exactly how the type one wants it done. They have strong opinions and strong ethics. They will not sit by and watch someone or listen to someone tell grandiose stories about doing something sloppily or cutting corners or being shady about something. They're very, very ethical. We have arrows and wings. We have directions that each Enneagram type moves to, but every Enneagram type moves to a different number in their stress and a different number in their strength. And so we'll talk about that first, and then we'll talk about wings. I just mentioned that I'm an Enneagram Type 2, and I have a 1 as one of my wings. And so the Enneagram 1 has a 2 wing and a 9 wing. Whatever number falls to each side of them, whatever flanks them, is their on the Enneagram circle is their wing. And so we'll talk a little bit about this. The 4 um, is a very emotional number. When the Enneagram Type 1 goes to the 4 because they're feeling stressed, they start turning on themselves. They start becoming moody and self-critical. That inner critic really starts getting to them, and they start feeling emotional about the imperfection that they see in themselves. They become secretly resentful of people who aren't holding themselves up to the same standard. And they might start feeling like they're the only ones in the world who care about doing things the right way. Instead of perfectionism, instead of trying to fix external problems, they start feeling like they are the problem. And that can be very painful for them. Comparison creeps in. Suddenly, everyone else is more successful, more creative, more fulfilled than they are. So when the 1 goes to the 4 in their stress, they can really kind of like have their emotions kind of implode on them. But when the Enneagram is feeling uh, confident, like they really know their stuff, they move toward the Enneagram Type 7 behaviors. They start seeing the bigger picture instead of focusing on all of the minute details. Imperfection starts to feel a little bit more like freedom. They start to let their hair down a little bit and embrace the good enough approach. And they make room for more joy. They start to enjoy being around their colleagues and listening to the stories that people have to share. And they start kind of like feeling a little bit more whimsical and engaging some of that fun instead of being more rigid and careful. And this is where they may start coming up with a few more jokes because the 7 is really known for their fun and adventure. And so when the 1 goes to the 7, they can really experience kind of like this lightness, and they may feel a little more inclined to have more humor in their life. All right, so the Enneagram Type 1 has 2 wings. On one side of them is the 9, on the other side of them is a 2. And so when we say 1 with a 9 wing, if you look at the bottom left-hand corner of this slide, you'll see something that says 1W9. That's how it is typically shows up. Like if you were to do a Google search for a 1W9, you would get results on the Enneagram Type 1 with a 9 wing. We have access to both of the numbers on either side of us. And so both of the numbers on one side and the other will influence us at various different times. But typically there is one number, one of those 2 numbers that you lean on more than the other, that influences you more than the other. So an Enneagram 1 with who kind of like leans on that 9 wing is kind of like practices their principled nature with a little bit more calm. They can kind of do a little bit better job of blocking out some of the chaos, because the Enneagram Type 9 really is kind of the one who is able to appreciate life in its chaos by rising above the chaos. And so once again, we have another number. The Enneagram Type 9 is also a very spiritual number. So the Enneagram 1 with a 9 wing may be even more inclined into religious orders or religious beliefs, because they have the 1 who is very principled and the 9 who is typically very spiritual. And that spirituality can take many different forms based on one's culture and beliefs. But the Enneagram Type 1 with a 9 wing often uses religion or faith to kind of rise above the chaos and to develop more of a peace amidst the storm kind of mentality and mindset. They're less judgmental, more philosophical, wanting to know, why is that person not inclined to do the right thing? Let's ask questions. Let's get curious. Um, they seek inner and outer peace. Once again, talking about kind of like that desire to transcend the chaos of the world. Then we have the Enneagram 1 with a 2 wing. The 2 is the one who really looks for opportunities to help people. And so when you have the Enneagram Type 1, who is very justice minded, they will often, when they have that influence from the 2 wing, they will use their superpowers to help people. And this is where, again, you might find them in religion, you might find them in politics. Whatever they feel will really make the most impact and help people is where you will likely find an Enneagram 1 with a 2 wing. The Enneagram Type 1 will sometimes have a little bit of an edge to the way that they help. They will often tell you, whether you are interested or in hearing it or not, the right way to do things. But as it says here on this slide, they have these high standards, but with lots of heart. That 2 wing really kind of like connects them. It's the 2s are more about connection uh, than being perfect. So the 2 winged influence will often pull them out of their perfectionism just enough to really connect with people. Um, Justice meets service. Person is likely to organize a protest and make sure everyone has water and snacks. So they are very concerned about making sure everyone is comfortable while also staying true to their mission. To make things more complicated, every type has a subtype. And there is a lot of words on this slide. So feel free to do a screenshot if you'd like. But based on the interest of time, I'm going to just say that with each type, you have either a self-preservation type, a social type, or a sexual type. And the sexual type is often referred to as the one-to-one type. And so the differences in the wide array of Enneagram Type 1s that we have in the world, there's these 3 subtypes often kind of influence them in different ways. So they kind of show up differently based on their subtype. The self-preservation type is more focused on improving themselves and less focused on improving other people. The social has a wider angle. They want to improve the world. Um, and so they may be more inclined to politics or macro level justice work. And then the sexual subtype is more focused on other people and less focused on themselves. So they have a tendency to be a little bit more controlling or impatient, a little bit more reactive. I wanted to take an opportunity to do a quick typing quiz. This comes from the Wisdom of the Enneagram, Riso and Hudson, and this is a 15 statement quiz. And so this will give you an opportunity to see where you fall in relation to the Enneagram Type One. So you can score using the following scale. Score a sentence a one if it's not at all true about you, a two if it's seldom true, a three if it is somewhat true, a four if it is generally true, and a five if it is very true. You'll have an opportunity to score the quiz at the end to see how closely related you are to the Enneagram Type One. So if you feel like taking this quiz, get out a pen and paper. You don't have to write down the questions. You can just write down a number that you can then tally up at the end. So here are the statements. Most people see me as a serious, no nonsense person. When all is said and done, I suppose I am. I have always tried to be honest and objective about myself, and I'm determined to follow my conscience no matter what the cost. While there is some part of me that can be wild, generally speaking, that just hasn't been my style. It seems that I'm living with a judge inside my head. Sometimes the judge is wise and discerning, but often it is simply stern and harsh. I feel that I have paid a great price for trying to be perfect. I like to laugh as much as anyone. I should do it more often. My principles and ideals inspire me toward greater achievement and make my life feel meaningful and worthwhile. I do not understand why so many people have such lax standards. So much depends on me getting things done that I have to be more organized and methodical than others. I have a personal sense of mission, maybe even calling to something higher. And I believe that there is something extraordinary that I will accomplish during my life. I hate mistakes. And so I tend to be extremely thorough to make sure that things are being done properly. Much of my life, I have believed that right is right and wrong is wrong. And that's all there is to it. I have a hard time leaving well enough alone. Many responsibilities have fallen on my shoulders. If I hadn't risen to the occasion, God only knows what would have happened. I am deeply moved by human nobility and grace under pressure. If you have written down a number for each of those statements, tally up your total. All right, and here are the results. If you were a 15, you're probably not a type 1, a 2, or a 6. If you rate 15 to 30, you are probably not a type 1. If your score was between 30 and 45, you most probably have similar challenges as a type 1 and or you have a type 1 parent. A 45 to 60, you most likely have a 1 component. Either that means that you're a wing of a 1 or you go to the 1 in stress or strength. And if you are a 60 to a 75, you are most likely a type one. But you could still be another type if you're thinking too narrowly about the one. I just wanted to explain that a little bit. If you're thinking too narrowly about the one, it means that you may be focusing on the most obvious or stereotypical traits of the ones, like being rigid or rule following or hyper organized. And the fact that ones can be idealists and reformers and justice seekers. Your inner critic may be loud, but that doesn't automatically mean that you're a one. So many types have an inner critic. Um, and it's easy to type yourself too quickly if you focus on the behavior of a one rather than the why behind those behaviors. So if you typed as a type one with this little quiz, it may still be another number, but at least it's a good launching pad to get you a little bit closer to figuring out exactly where you stand. And it's interesting that ones are most likely to misidentify themselves as fives, fours, and sixes if they misidentify themselves. The threes, the sixes, and sevens are most likely to misidentify themselves as type ones. This is why it's always a good idea to talk with people who know the Enneagram until you have a little bit more understanding about all the various different types, because these wings and arrows and the way that we move around the Enneagram can be really confusing sometimes. So finding your inner one, these are just like journaling questions that you may or may not resonate with, but I wanted to just point out that we all have all nine of the Enneagram type characteristics inside of us somewhere, because all nine of the Enneagram type characteristics are human experiences. And so just because you don't identify as a type one, if you don't identify as a type one, you may still have some relationship to some of the characteristics that we talked about tonight. And so these are a little bit of, some ways that you can identify your inner type one. When have you made a small mistake but replayed it in your head for days? What's a cause or an ethical issue that makes you want to stand up and shout, "That's not okay"? What's a habit, a routine, or a code that you live by that gives you a sense of order and purpose? When was the last time you corrected someone? Were you actually helping or just trying to be right? Where in your life could you benefit from giving yourself a little more grace? Empathy for the ones in your life. Think about the most responsible, detail oriented person that you know. How might their constant drive for perfection actually be stressful for them and not just for you? What's one thing a type one in your life has done that you totally took for granted? Ones often feel that they have to be the moral compass. What's one way that you can ease their burden by sharing responsibility for fairness and integrity? And then how would your relationship with a one change if you saw their high standards as a reflection of their deep commitment to excellence, not as a judgment of you? Finally, how to love your one. It's important that we appreciate their dedication and their tireless efforts. Love them for their high standards. Acknowledge that the way that they are quiet architects of integrity, they are the steady hands that keep things running. They are voices that remind us to be better, not just for ourselves, but for the world. They need a little help remembering that they too deserve grace. And remind them often that they are already good enough, just as they are. And then I couldn't resist. This was just to be silly. Um, I was just being playful with the Enneagram Type One. Um, and talking
Okay.
about the variety of things that people put ketchup on that they might have a problem with. All right. Well, that concludes the Enneagram Type 1 deep dive.